Okay, welcome back to another Windwalker video. Today we're going to be going over combat improvements. Um, I'm playing currently as a mage at level 25, and my items are of rarity 2, which is the third rarity or third lowest rarity. So like the midpoint rarity. So I have a couple skills available to me. One of the biggest improvements that I made during kind of playtesting for a few days in combat was the time it takes to complete everyone's turn. So previously, if you were a melee character, you would walk all the way up over, attack, run back, wait. Someone else would walk over, attack, come back, and wait. So we just reduced that time by a lot, or rather that distance from that character to the other character. So I will attack here as a mage. And you can see I didn't really move there. And everyone's kind of moving really quickly, so I could even consider adding in some sort of delay time, because maybe it's a little too fast. Yeah, I can cast these abilities, kill that one, that guy went, my pet went. So everything's happening much quicker, which is nice, but arguably maybe too fast. So yeah, we'll just finish combat here. And just sound because I don't hear it in my headphones, but there is sound. Status effects, it's a bug there where we need to get that to show, but not too high priority currently. I believe this prefab is actually the wrong prefab for the golem. It should be that one. Yeah, mage can use chaotic claw. It deals damage a random amount of times. So yeah, combat's in a much better state in terms of speed. So this is a list of monsters. So this is how I'm currently tracking my playtest sessions. Which class am I playing as? What level am I? Do I have a pet? What's my item rarity average? So what of the items I have equipped, or if I don't, what's their rarity? And then how many turns did it take for combat to end? And this is all manual. You could argue that some sort of automated testing would be really useful, but for now it's just manual testing, and automation could maybe come later, depending on the necessity. But currently I'm actually pretty pleased with the results. I think because of a lot of the initial legwork that I did in terms of balancing the different classes, we're seeing similar results in terms of a win status for the first three primary classes. And what I mean by that is you'll see here the warrior has lost 3 times. The mage has also lost 3 times, or 4 times rather, and the ranger has lost 2 times. So there's not that much variation. You could argue that this is maybe a little bit small of a sample size, but I think further testing would show that this is actually okay. And the reason why I didn't continue testing these other classes is because we currently have a bug with some of our modifier stats just calculating the stats incorrectly. So I'm testing at the later levels, you'd be more likely to get those modifier stats on your items, which would just kind of lead to inaccurate results. And I noticed that there were issues with, there were other issues actually with combat, which we're going to go into next, which is related to our monsters. So these are our different monsters. We have the mobs, the tamables, and the bosses. We can ignore that last one. So how we broke down mobs, essentially they're defaulted to this balanced stat modifier, and this means that they're just going to roll based on their level. They need to have a certain power level. So if they're balanced, they can kind of just get almost any stat a random amount of times. Whereas if they're offensive, brawny, spellcaster, whatever, they'll roll stats that are more in line with that sort of grouping. So the easiest example is like a spellcaster will roll probably more intelligence, more magic attack, more magic defense, maybe some elemental resistances, and less of the strength and dexterity, things like that. So what I realized that I didn't actually do was I didn't really bucketize a lot of these monsters. So I spent just a little bit of time figuring out, okay, based on how they look, what kind of modifier do I want to give them? And then I can also individually change those modifiers on top of this. So, like for example, the bat is going to be offensive in nature, but I also want to make sure that the vampire or the bat has some sort of like bat-like tendencies in games. In which this specific case, I actually added some lifesteal because it kind of looks like a little vampire bat. And there are other examples of customizing monsters. Like for a lot of the mages, I gave them summoning abilities. I added more spellcaster monsters, so I just changed from balance to spellcaster because I noticed that there were a lot of monsters that were very physically. They had a very like physical affinity instead of magical. So what I did was actually look at our database of monsters here. As you can see, we have about 12,000 of them with plans to add more. And just execute some SQL to say, okay, how much, what's the average physical damage and magic damage from all the monsters? And this is actually after a change that I had made. Previously, this magic damage was not crazy, not much lower, but in my opinion, significantly lower than what it should be, or than the physical damage. So now, after the change I made, when you add these numbers up to the right of the physical damage, it's pretty close to what we want for physical damage. And if we didn't have this, that would render our magic defense stat not as useful as the physical damage or as a physical defense stat, which is not what we want. We want them to be somewhat equal. So this was a necessary change. And so back to monster, or I guess we're still on monsters. One more thing that I noticed during playtesting was that monsters weren't really using abilities. They had a higher chance to, the higher level you got, but it was a lot more fun when I was fighting monsters and they were actually using their abilities. So what I did was go to this monster behavior dictionary, and I have essentially a chance of them to cast any of these 7 types of abilities or 6 types of abilities. And I just went and increased them. So pretty much all across the board, every monster and pet has a higher chance to cast abilities. And they're not using them randomly. They're checking for preconditions to make sure that they're met, and it makes sense to use those things. And yeah, I think that's it. We'll keep this one a bit shorter and concise. Thanks for watching.